She was left at the altar. A Sioux warrior promised she'd never shed another tear. Clara had always imagined her wedding day in perfect detail. From the moment she was a little girl, she dreamed of walking down a long aisle lined with flowers, the sunlight glinting off sparkling decorations, and the gentle smile of the person she loved most waiting at the other end. She pictured laughter, joyful tears, and the quiet, steady feeling of knowing that she had found someone who would always be by her side. That day was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, a day when all her hopes for the future would finally begin to take shape. Her fiancé, Daniel, had seemed perfect to her. He was charming, attentive, and always knew the right words to say. When he asked Clara to marry him, she had felt like the luckiest person in the world. Their families had celebrated together, friends had cheered, and she had spent months planning every detail of the wedding herself. She had chosen the flowers carefully, written her own vows, and even selected the soft, gentle music that would play as she walked down the aisle. In her mind, it all came together like a storybook, and nothing could possibly go wrong. But sometimes, life has a way of turning even the most carefully planned dreams into something unexpected. On the morning of the wedding, Clara woke up early, her heart fluttering with excitement. The sun shone through the curtains, casting warm, golden light across her room. She put on her dress, a flowing white gown that made her feel like she was stepping into a fairy tale. Her hair was done in soft waves, and her makeup highlighted her bright eyes, which were full of hope and joy. Her friends and family helped her with the final touches, fussing over her dress and making sure every detail was perfect. Laughter filled the air as they teased each other and shared stories, creating a sense of warmth and love that Clara would carry with her forever, or so she thought. As the time for the ceremony approached, Clara's heart began to race. She could hear the music starting in the distance, a gentle melody that made her chest tighten with anticipation. She looked toward the aisle, imagining Daniel standing at the end, smiling at her the way he always did. She tried to calm her nerves, taking slow, deep breaths, telling herself that everything would be perfect. She told herself that this was the moment she had been waiting for her entire life. But when the doors opened and she began to walk toward the aisle, her heart sank. Daniel was nowhere to be seen. She paused, her hand clutching the bouquet tightly, and looked around nervously. The guests whispered among themselves, some glancing awkwardly at her, others looking worried. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, and still he did not appear. Clara's chest tightened, her excitement slowly twisting into confusion, then fear. Finally, she heard a voice behind her. It was her best friend, someone who had known every dream and heartbreak in her life. "Clara," she said gently, "he's not coming." The words hit Clara like a cold wind. She felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. Her mind refused to accept what she was hearing. "What do you mean he's not coming?" she asked, her voice trembling. He promised me he would be here." Her friend shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "He left. He ran away. I don't know why, but he's gone." Clara felt a strange numbness wash over her. The world seemed to tilt, the bright colors of the flowers and decorations blurring together. She could hear people whispering behind her, but their words seemed distant, muffled. She wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, to find Daniel and understand why he had abandoned her at the one moment she had believed would define her happiness. But no sound came out of her mouth. She simply stood there, frozen, clutching her bouquet, as the reality sank in. For a long time, she could not move. Her friends tried to comfort her, surrounding her with hugs and gentle words, but nothing reached the hollow ache inside her chest. She felt betrayed, humiliated, and utterly alone. The love she had believed in so completely had vanished without warning, leaving her with a sense of emptiness that was impossible to describe. It was not just sadness she felt. It was a profound sense of loss, a grief for the life she thought she was about to begin. After the initial shock, Clara retreated into herself. She left the wedding hall quietly, avoiding the eyes of the guests who had come to celebrate her. She could feel their pity, their awkward glances, but she could not bear to face them. Instead, she walked alone through the streets, the late morning sun warm on her shoulders, the world around her continuing as if nothing had happened. It was surreal. How could life go on when hers had felt so completely shattered? In the days that followed, Clara struggled to make sense of what had happened. She replayed every moment in her mind, searching for signs, for clues, for some hint that might explain why Daniel had left. She questioned herself, wondering if she had done something wrong, if she had missed some warning. But deep down, she knew the fault did not lie with her. The pain came from the betrayal itself, from the sudden loss of trust and the breaking of a promise that had meant everything. Her family and friends tried to support her, offering advice, listening to her tears and reminding her of her worth. But healing was not immediate. Each morning brought a new wave of sorrow, each night a reminder of what had been taken from her. She found it difficult to imagine ever trusting someone again, to believe that love could be real when it had ended in such heartbreak. Despite the overwhelming sadness, a small spark of determination began to grow inside Clara. She realized that while she could not change what had happened, she could choose how to respond. She could allow the betrayal to define her, or she could use it as a turning point, a moment to discover her own strength. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, she began to reclaim her sense of self. She focused on small acts of self-care, long walks in the park, quiet mornings with her favorite books, afternoons spent sketching and painting. She allowed herself to cry, to feel the grief fully, knowing that only by facing it could she begin to heal. One evening, as Clara sat on the porch of her small apartment, watching the sun set in soft, golden light, she made a silent promise to herself. She would not let this heartbreak destroy her. She would find a way to live fully again, to trust in love, to open her heart once more. The journey ahead would be difficult, and the pain might never fully disappear, but she knew she had the strength to face it. And so, even as the memory of the wedding day lingered like a shadow, Clara began to take the first steps toward a new life. She did not yet know what the future would hold, who she would meet, or where her path would lead. But for the first time since that devastating day, she felt a flicker of hope, a sense that perhaps someday joy could return. The road ahead was uncertain, but Clara was determined to walk it on her own terms, guided by the quiet strength she had discovered within herself. After the heartbreak of being left at the altar, Clara decided she needed more than time. She needed space. The familiar streets of her hometown, once full of memories of love and laughter, now felt like reminders of betrayal. Every corner, every cafe, every flower shop seemed to whisper that her dreams had been shattered. She needed to step away to breathe and to find herself somewhere far from the weight of her past. She packed a small bag, taking only the essentials, a few clothes, her journal, a sketchbook, and a camera. She wanted a journey that would allow her to think, to reflect, and maybe to heal. The idea of traveling alone scared her at first, but something deep inside told her it was the right thing to do. She wanted silence, the kind of quiet that allowed the heart to speak, that made it possible to feel again without being overwhelmed by the world. Her travels led her to South Dakota, a land of wide skies, rolling plains, and quiet forests. The air was fresh and cool, carrying the scent of pine and earth. She rented a small cabin on the edge of a reservation, a place where the rhythm of life felt slow and unhurried. Here, the world seemed different, as if it had stepped out of time, a world where pain could be felt fully, but also slowly released. Clara found comfort in the simplicity of her surroundings, the creaking of old wooden floors, the soft rustle of leaves, the distant calls of birds at dawn. It was on one of her morning walks through the woods that Clara first saw him. He appeared almost out of nowhere, a tall figure moving with ease through the trees. His presence was calm, grounded, and yet commanding. There was something in his eyes, a quiet strength, a deep understanding that made Clara pause. She instinctively stepped back, unsure why a stranger in the forest would feel so familiar, so safe. His name was Wicasa, a Sioux man known in the community for his wisdom and gentle spirit. He lived simply, deeply connected to the land and traditions of his people. He could track the movements of deer, understand the sounds of birds, and knew the secrets of the forests in a way that seemed almost magical to Clara. When he noticed her watching, he smiled, not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but in a way that made her feel seen. Their first conversation was cautious. Clara was hesitant, still fragile from her heartbreak, unsure of how to trust another person. Wicasa, on the other hand, spoke with patience, never pressing, always listening. He asked her simple questions: where she was from, what had brought her to this land, what she loved about life. Clara found herself opening slowly, surprised by how natural it felt to speak with him. It was as if the forest itself encouraged honesty, and Wicasa's presence was a steady anchor in the uncertainty of her emotions. Days turned into weeks, and Clara's routine became intertwined with Wicasa's gentle guidance. He showed her how to recognize the tracks of animals in the soil, how to identify plants that could be used for healing, and how to sit quietly by the river and listen, not just to the water, but to herself. For the first time since her wedding day, she felt a kind of peace she had never known. The grief that had once seemed unending began to soften, yet healing was not simple. There were moments when the memory of Daniel and the humiliation she had felt would surge back, sharp and bitter. She would sit alone in the cabin, tears streaming silently, wondering why she had been abandoned. Wicasa never rushed her, never tried to erase her pain. Instead, he shared stories from his life and from the traditions of his people, stories of resilience, of sorrow transformed into strength, of hearts mended through patience and self-respect. One evening, after a long day of hiking and learning about the land, Clara and Wicasa sat by a campfire. The flames danced in the night, throwing soft shadows across their faces. Clara spoke quietly about her past, about Daniel, about the day she had been left at the altar. She spoke of shame, of grief, and of the fear that she might never love again. Wicasa listened, nodding occasionally, his eyes reflecting both understanding and compassion. "When someone leaves," he said finally, "it is not a reflection of your worth. It is a reflection of their own journey, their own fears. You are not broken because they ran. You are whole because you continue to feel, to live, and to breathe. That is strength." Clara felt the weight of his words settle in her chest. It was not the kind of comfort that erased pain, but it was the kind that made it possible to carry the pain differently, with dignity instead of despair. Slowly, she began to understand that her heartbreak did not define her. She was more than the day she had been left behind. She was more than the promises that had been broken. As the days went by, Clara noticed subtle changes in herself. She laughed more easily, the sound of it light and unexpected. She began to sketch the landscapes around her, capturing the quiet beauty of the forests and rivers, finding joy in creativity that had been dormant for too long. She started writing in her journal again, recording not just her grief, but her thoughts, her hopes, and the small victories of each day. Wicasa became a steady presence, a guide who never imposed, but whose quiet wisdom shaped Clara's journey in ways she could not have anticipated. He taught her that healing was not linear, that grief could ebb and flow like the tides, and that every emotion, no matter how painful, had value. Clara learned to listen to her own heart, to honor her feelings without letting them control her. It was during one of these quiet moments that Clara realized something important. Trust was not about expecting perfection from others. Trust was about believing in one's own resilience, about knowing that no matter what happened, she could survive and even grow stronger. Wicasa never asked her to forget her past. He asked her only to face it, to acknowledge it, and to let it guide her toward a future that she could shape herself. The bond between Clara and Wicasa deepened over time, though it was never romantic in a way that pressured her. Instead, it was a connection built on respect, patience, and shared experiences. They hiked together, cooked meals over open fires, and shared stories of their childhoods. Clara learned about Sioux culture and traditions, the dances, the songs, the ceremonies that honored both life and loss. These teachings offered her not just knowledge, but also a lens through which to view her own pain with compassion and understanding. One particularly cold morning, as snow lightly covered the ground, Wicasa and Clara stood near a frozen river. He handed her a small stone, smooth and cold in her hand. "This river," he said, "has been here long before us, and it will continue long after. The water flows, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, but it always moves forward. You are like this river. Let yourself flow, Clara. Let your heart move even if it hurts." Clara held the stone, feeling its weight, and thought about the river. She imagined herself as water, moving past obstacles, shaping the land and carrying memories without being held captive by them. For the first time in months, she felt hope. Not a fragile, fleeting hope, but a steady, growing sense that life could be full again, that she could trust herself, and that her heart could one day open to love once more. By the time Clara's trip was nearing its end, she felt transformed. She was still carrying the scars of her heartbreak, but they no longer controlled her. She had learned to sit with her emotions, to face them honestly, and to find strength in vulnerability. The forest, the quiet skies, and the guidance of Wicasa had shown her that life, even after betrayal, could be beautiful. As she packed her things to leave the cabin, Clara felt a mixture of gratitude and sadness. She had grown attached to the place, to the quiet rhythms of life there, and to Wicasa, whose presence had guided her through the darkest days. But she knew it was time to move forward, to carry the lessons she had learned into the next chapter of her life. She promised herself that she would honor the strength she had discovered, and that she would never allow her heartbreak to define her again. With one last look at the forest, Clara felt a calm determination settle in her chest. The pain of her past would always be a part of her, but so too would be the resilience she had found. She stepped onto the path leading away from the cabin, ready to face the world with a renewed heart, carrying the quiet wisdom of the land and the friendship of the man who had shown her that even after sorrow, life could be full, beautiful, and free. Clara returned to her hometown after the months in South Dakota, but she was not the same person who had left. The girl who had been left at the altar, broken and unsure, was still inside her, but she had grown stronger, wiser, and more aware of her own heart. The days of sorrow and confusion were not forgotten, but they no longer controlled her. She had learned to face her emotions without fear, and to embrace the quiet strength she had discovered in the forests, rivers, and mountains she had walked through. Even though she was back in the familiar streets, Clara could feel the difference in herself. She walked with a steadier step, spoke with more confidence, and no longer felt the constant ache of betrayal in her chest. She spent mornings in her favorite cafe, sketching the people around her, capturing moments of everyday life in her journal, and practicing mindfulness in the smallest actions. Breathing slowly, noticing the colors of flowers, listening to the laughter of children. Life seemed brighter, more detailed, and more full of possibilities. Yet, despite this progress, there were times when memories of that devastating wedding day would creep back unexpectedly. She would see a wedding advertisement on a poster, hear a song on the radio, or catch sight of a bride in the street, and the old pain would stir. But now, Clara did not hide from it or let it overwhelm her. She allowed herself to feel, to remember, and then to let go. She reminded herself that healing was a process, not a race, and that each step she took forward, no matter how small, was a victory. One afternoon, as she was walking through a local park, she noticed a familiar figure sitting on a bench near the pond. It was Wakasa. She was surprised. She had not expected to see him in her hometown. He smiled warmly when he saw her, and for a moment the world seemed to pause. Clara felt a wave of calm wash over her. She realized that their connection had not faded with distance. It had grown, strengthened by the lessons they had shared and the time they had spent together in the quiet of the forest. Wakasa rose and approached her slowly, careful to give her space. "I wanted to see how you were doing," he said simply. There was no judgment in his eyes, no expectation, only understanding and quiet support. Clara felt herself relax in his presence. For the first time in months, she felt truly seen, not as someone broken by heartbreak, but as someone who had survived, learned, and grown. They began to spend more time together, slowly and naturally. Wakasa introduced her to new experiences that encouraged self-reflection and inner growth. They visited art galleries, where Clara discovered that creativity could be a form of healing. She tried pottery, sculpting her emotions into shapes that expressed her feelings more clearly than words ever could. Wakasa guided her gently, reminding her that mistakes were part of the process and that imperfection could hold beauty. Clara began to understand that life, much like art, was not about perfection. It was about authenticity. They also explored the natural world together. On weekends, they hiked through nearby hills, finding quiet spots by rivers and under ancient trees. Wakasa taught her how to observe nature closely, the way birds moved, how the wind shifted through the leaves, and how water flowed over stones in a never-ending dance. Clara noticed that being present in these small details helped her focus on the present rather than the past. She realized that life was full of beauty, waiting to be noticed, even when it seemed small or ordinary. In these moments, Clara discovered a new kind of joy. It was quieter than the excitement of a wedding day, but deeper and more enduring. She laughed freely again, without fear of judgment or betrayal. She shared her thoughts, dreams, and fears with Wakasa, and he listened with patience, never rushing her or trying to give answers she was not ready to hear. Their conversations were filled with honesty and warmth, and Clara felt herself opening up in ways she had not since her heartbreak. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky with soft shades of orange and pink, Clara and Wakasa sat by a small lake. The water reflected the sky, calm and serene, and Clara felt a sense of peace she had not known for years. Wakasa spoke about the importance of balance in life, the balance between joy and sorrow, between giving and receiving, and between self-care and care for others. Clara listened intently, absorbing his words, and realized how much she had grown. She was no longer afraid of sorrow, because she had learned that it could coexist with happiness and even strengthen it. As their bond deepened, Wakasa introduced Clara to elements of Sioux traditions that focused on healing and resilience. He shared stories of ancestors who had faced great challenges but had found strength through community, respect, and self-awareness. Clara was fascinated, not only by the wisdom of these traditions, but also by the way they encouraged personal growth. She began to understand that her heartbreak, while painful, could be transformed into a source of strength and compassion. They also spent time volunteering in the community, helping children with art projects and assisting in environmental cleanups. Clara found that giving back created a sense of purpose and fulfillment she had never experienced before. Helping others allowed her to step outside her own pain and recognize the interconnectedness of life. She realized that healing was not just about caring for herself. It was also about spreading kindness and making a positive impact on the world around her. Through all of these experiences, Clara noticed subtle changes in herself. She was more patient, more compassionate, and more confident in her ability to face challenges. She no longer felt the desperate need for validation from others because she had learned to validate herself. She embraced her own worth, recognizing that she was deserving of love, respect, and happiness, regardless of what had happened in the past. Yet, even as she grew stronger, Clara could feel the lingering shadow of her wedding day. There were moments when fear and doubt crept in, whispering that she might be abandoned again. That trust was dangerous. But Wikasa's presence reminded her that she was capable of resilience. He never tried to erase her fears but helped her understand them, face them, and move beyond them. He taught her that healing was not about forgetting. It was about integrating the past into a stronger, wiser version of herself. One afternoon, while sitting under a large oak tree, Wikasa handed Clara a small bundle of dried herbs. "These are for courage," he said gently. "Whenever you feel fear, hold them and remember the strength you already have." Clara took the bundle, feeling its warmth in her hands, and realized that healing was not just about enduring. It was about nurturing, protecting, and strengthening herself in ways she had never imagined. As the weeks turned into months, Clara noticed a profound shift in her heart. She was no longer defined by the betrayal she had experienced. Instead, she was defined by her own courage, her willingness to face pain, and her determination to live fully. She had discovered that strength was not the absence of emotion, but the ability to feel deeply and still move forward. By the end of this period, Clara felt ready to embrace life in a new way. She had learned to trust herself, to find joy in small moments, and to recognize the value of genuine connection. She understood that love, when it came, would not be about dependency or fear. It would be about mutual respect, support, and shared growth. Wikasa had taught her that the heart could heal, that pain could be transformed into wisdom, and that resilience was the key to a fulfilling life. As Clara stood by the window of her apartment one evening, watching the sun dip behind the city skyline, she reflected on how far she had come. She thought about the girl who had been abandoned at the altar, who had cried in silence and felt hopeless. That girl still existed within her, but now she was stronger, wiser, and more capable of embracing the beauty of life. Clara realized that the heartbreak she had suffered was not the end of her story. It was the beginning of a journey towards self-discovery, courage, and true emotional freedom. With a deep breath, Clara smiled. She had learned that life, even after pain, could be rich, meaningful, and full of love. Love for herself, love for others, and love for the world around her. She knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them with grace, strength, and an open heart. And for the first time in a long time, she truly believed that happiness was not just a dream. It was something she could create for herself, one day at a time. Even after months of healing and growth, Clara knew that her journey was far from over. The pain of being left at the altar had left a deep mark, one that would not disappear overnight. It was not just about betrayal. It was about trust, hope, and the quiet dreams she had carried for years, dreams that had been shattered in a single moment. She had learned to live with the memory of that day, to embrace her resilience, and to find beauty and strength in her everyday life. But a part of her still felt incomplete. One morning, Clara awoke with a sense that she needed to face the past more directly. She realized that avoiding her memories, even as she healed, kept a small part of her heart locked away. She wanted closure, not for Daniel, who had caused her pain, but for herself. She needed to acknowledge the heartbreak fully, to honor her feelings, and to transform them into wisdom and courage. She reached out to Wikasa and explained her thoughts. "I need to see it all," she said softly. "I need to face it, to understand it, and then let it go." Wikasa nodded, his eyes calm and encouraging. "Then we will do this together," he said. "You will not face it alone." His presence had become a steady source of comfort for her, not because he tried to fix her, but because he reminded her of her own strength and guided her gently through her emotions. The next day, they drove to her hometown, to the very church where she had been left at the altar. Clara's heart raced as they approached the familiar building. She could see the white doors, the tall windows, and the flowers that had been arranged for her wedding day, now faded with time. She took a deep breath and stepped out of the car, Wakasa by her side, steady and silent. As she entered the church, memories came flooding back. The excitement she had felt, the nervous laughter, the sound of music, and the sudden, devastating realization that Daniel had disappeared. She could feel the old pain rising, but this time she faced it head-on. She allowed herself to cry, letting the tears flow freely without shame or fear. Wakasa stood nearby, offering silent support, his presence a reminder that she was not alone in her grief. Clara walked down the aisle, slowly and deliberately, her hand brushing the backs of the pews. She remembered the dream she had once carried, the hopes she had invested in a future that had been taken from her. She felt sadness, but also a growing sense of strength. The place that had once been a symbol of betrayal was now becoming a place of transformation. She realized that the power to heal had always been within her. It was only waiting for her to claim it. After some time in the church, Clara and Wakasa left and went to a quiet park nearby. The sun was warm on their shoulders, and the soft rustle of leaves created a gentle melody. They sat together on a bench, and Clara shared her thoughts, memories, and fears. She spoke of the humiliation she had felt, the grief that had seemed unending, and the lingering doubts about herself. Wakasa listened patiently, nodding occasionally, never rushing her or trying to offer empty comfort. His presence alone was enough to remind her that strength came not from avoiding pain, but from facing it with courage. Then, in a quiet and tender moment, Wakasa reached out and took her hand. "Clara," he said gently, "I cannot erase what happened, but I can promise something." Clara looked at him, her heart both hopeful and cautious. "What promise?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "You will never shed another tear from heartbreak," he said. "Not because the world will be perfect or because pain will never return, but because you have the strength, the wisdom, and the courage to face it. You will carry it with dignity, learn from it, and move forward. I will stand beside you, not to take your pain away, but to remind you of your own power to heal." Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest. The promise was not about protection from sorrow. It was about empowerment, about reclaiming control over her life and emotions. She realized that she had already begun to live this promise, through the lessons she had learned and the strength she had discovered in herself. Wakasa's words were like a mirror, reflecting the courage she had cultivated and the resilience she had built over months of quiet struggle. In the days that followed, Clara continued to explore her feelings, guided by Wakasa's wisdom. They visited peaceful places, gardens, rivers, and quiet trails, where she could reflect on her journey and reconnect with herself. She practiced mindfulness and meditation, focusing on the present moment and allowing herself to feel fully without judgment. Each step, each breath, each quiet reflection became a part of her healing, reinforcing the promise she had received. Clara also began to share her story with others, not for sympathy, but to inspire understanding and empathy. She volunteered at a local center for young women, speaking about resilience, self-love, and the power of facing pain. She told them that heartbreak, while difficult, could be a teacher if approached with honesty and courage. She encouraged them to trust themselves, to honor their emotions, and to seek guidance when needed. In helping others, Clara found that her own healing deepened, creating a cycle of compassion and strength. One afternoon, Wakasa suggested they participate in a traditional ceremony on his reservation, a ritual that honored both life and the lessons learned from hardship. Clara was hesitant at first, unsure if she was ready, but Wakasa reassured her. "It is not about perfection," he said. "It is about acknowledgement, respect, and transformation." Clara agreed, feeling a sense of anticipation and quiet nervousness. During the ceremony, Clara reflected on her journey, from the devastation of the wedding day to the months of healing and growth. She thought about the grief she had carried, the the moments of despair, and the victories, both large and small, that had brought her to this point. She felt gratitude for Wakasa, for his patient guidance, and for the lessons she had learned from the land, nature, and her own resilience. By the end of the ritual, she felt a lightness in her chest, as if a weight she had carried for years had finally been lifted. The promise Wakasa had made continued to echo in her heart. It was not about avoiding sadness, fear, or disappointment. It was about the knowledge that she could navigate these emotions with strength and grace. She understood that life would continue to present challenges, but she had the tools, the courage, and the wisdom to face them. She could cry when needed, yes, but those tears would be a release, not a surrender. She had learned to transform pain into understanding, grief into compassion, and heartbreak into resilience. Clara also noticed a change in how she approached relationships. She no longer felt the need to rely on others for validation or happiness. She understood that true connection was built on respect, patience, and mutual growth, not dependence or expectation. She approached friendships and family connections with more openness, honesty, and authenticity, knowing that her past experiences had shaped her, but did not define her. In the evenings, Clara would often sit with Wakasa by a fire, watching the flames dance and listening to the quiet sounds of the world around them. They would talk about life, dreams, fears, and hopes for the future. Sometimes they would sit in silence, comfortable in each other's presence, understanding that connection did not always require words. In these moments, Clara realized that healing was not a solitary process. While self-reflection and courage were essential, having someone who truly understood and supported you could make the journey more profound and meaningful. By the time part 4 of her journey came to an end, Clara had reached a level of emotional strength and clarity she had never thought possible. The promise that Wakasa had made was no longer just words. It was a lived experience, woven into the way she thought, felt, and acted. She knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but she also knew that she had the resilience to face them without fear. She had reclaimed her heart, not as a fragile vessel, but as a source of strength, compassion, and wisdom. Clara understood, finally, that being left at the altar had not defined the entirety of her life. It had been a painful chapter, yes, but it had also been a catalyst for growth, self-discovery, and transformation. With Wakasa's guidance, her own courage, and the lessons she had learned, she had begun to live fully again, open to joy, love, and life, without allowing past pain to cast a shadow over her future. And so, as the sun set on that chapter of her life, Clara felt a sense of quiet triumph. She had faced the deepest wound of her heart, acknowledged it fully, and transformed it into a source of strength. The promise that she would never shed another tear from heartbreak was no longer a hope, it was a reality, born from courage, wisdom, and the unwavering support of someone who believed in her, even when she had struggled to believe in herself. Clara woke up that morning with a sense of quiet clarity she had never felt before. The days of uncertainty, grief, and doubt that had once clouded her mind now felt distant, like shadows that had slowly faded with the light. She stretched and looked out the window of her apartment at the soft glow of dawn, painting the city in pale gold. The world seemed calm, open, and full of possibility, a world she was finally ready to embrace. Over the months, Clara had learned that healing was not a single moment or a magical event. It had been a journey of small, intentional steps, breathing, reflecting, creating, exploring, and most importantly, allowing herself to feel. She had cried when she needed to cry, laughed when she felt joy, and faced the past with courage she had never known she possessed. Every day had been a lesson, every challenge a chance to grow, and now she could feel the strength she had cultivated flowing through her. Wakasa had been a constant presence during this transformation. His quiet wisdom, patience, and deep understanding had guided Clara through the hardest parts of her journey, but he had never pushed or judged. He had shown her that strength was not about avoiding pain, but about facing it honestly and using it to build resilience. And now, Clara realized that she had internalized that strength. She carried it within herself, fully, without dependence on anyone else. As the morning light warmed the room, Clara decided to take a walk. She stepped outside and felt the crisp air on her face, the rhythm of her steps matching the steady beat of her heart. She noticed the little details that she had once overlooked, the way sunlight danced on leaves, the cheerful chatter of birds, the soft laughter of children playing in a nearby park. These small moments of beauty no longer passed unnoticed. They reminded her that life was full of wonder, even in the simplest things. Walking through the park, Clara felt a sense of peace she had never thought possible. She no longer feared disappointment, betrayal, or the possibility of being hurt again. She had learned that the heart could endure pain and still remain open, capable of joy, trust, and love. Every scar she carried was a testament to her resilience, a reminder that she had faced life's challenges and emerged stronger. Wakasa joined her on the path, his presence calm and steady. They walked side by side, speaking quietly about their plans and dreams. Clara felt a warmth in her heart, not the fragile warmth of a fleeting hope, but a deep, steady warmth that came from self-knowledge, courage, and the understanding that she could navigate life's challenges with grace. She realized that her relationship with Wakasa had evolved into something profoundly meaningful, a bond built on mutual respect, shared growth, and unwavering support. Over the next few weeks, Clara embraced life fully. She reconnected with old friends and family, sharing her experiences and insights with them. She discovered that vulnerability was not weakness, it was strength. By opening her heart to honest connections, she found joy, laughter, and understanding in ways she had never anticipated. She nurtured her passions, creating art and writing that reflected her journey, each piece a celebration of resilience, self-discovery, and hope. One day, Clara visited a local art exhibit where her own sketches were displayed. She had never imagined that her personal reflections and expressions of emotion could inspire others. People came to view her work, and she listened as they shared how her art touched them, encouraged them, or reminded them of their own journeys. Clara felt a sense of fulfillment she had never known. Her pain had not been wasted. It had been transformed into something meaningful, something that could help others find strength in their own lives. Clara also found herself drawn to nature more than ever. She and Wakasa spent weekends exploring forests, rivers, and hills, learning more about the world around them and the lessons it could teach. Clara had come to understand that life, like nature, moved in cycles, sometimes slow, sometimes fast, but always forward. Every step she took in the world became a reflection of the strength, resilience, and wisdom she had developed over the months. As she continued to grow, Clara noticed a new sense of confidence emerging. She no longer felt the need to seek validation from others because she had learned to validate herself. She trusted her own decisions, her instincts, and her heart. She approached new experiences with curiosity and courage, knowing that mistakes and challenges were part of life, but that she had the tools to navigate them. One afternoon, as Clara and Wakasa sat by a quiet lake, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She thought of the day she had been abandoned, the months of grief and healing, and the countless moments of learning, courage, and growth that had followed. She realized that the heartbreak she had suffered had not destroyed her, it had transformed her. It had taught her to love herself, to trust herself, and to embrace life fully. Wakasa looked at her with a gentle smile. "You have come far," he said quietly. "The promise was not just my words, it was a reflection of the strength that was already within you. You have carried it well." Clara felt a wave of gratitude and warmth. She understood now that the promise he had made, that she would never shed another tear from heartbreak, was not about avoiding sorrow, but about claiming her own power to heal, grow, and live fully. In the weeks that followed, Clara continued to explore the possibilities of life. She pursued new opportunities, reconnected with old passions, and approached relationships with a renewed sense of clarity and openness. She no longer feared intimacy or trust, because she understood that the foundation of any connection was self-awareness, courage, and mutual respect. She had learned that love, when it came, would not be about dependence or fear. It would be about partnership, support, and shared growth. Clara also dedicated time to helping others. She volunteered at community centers, shared her story with young women struggling with heartbreak, and offered guidance and encouragement to those seeking hope and strength. She realized that her experiences, though painful, had equipped her with the empathy and insight to inspire others. By giving back, Clara found an even deeper sense of purpose, knowing that her journey could help others navigate their own challenges with courage. As the months turned into a year, Clara felt a sense of peace and fulfillment that she had never known. The girl who had once been left at the altar, heartbroken and uncertain, had grown into a woman of strength, wisdom, and resilience. She had faced her pain, embraced her journey, and transformed her heartbreak into a source of empowerment. She had learned that life was not defined by the moments of despair, but by the courage, hope, and growth that followed them. One crisp morning, Clara stood on a hill overlooking the city, the sunrise casting golden light across the rooftops. She felt the warmth of the sun on her face and the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, feeling gratitude for the journey she had taken, the heartbreak, the healing, and the lessons learned along the way. She felt ready to embrace whatever the future held, confident in her ability to navigate life with courage, grace, and joy. Clara knew that challenges would still come, that life would sometimes be difficult, and that sorrow might visit again. But she also knew that she had the strength to face it, the wisdom to learn from it, and the courage to move forward without fear. She had claimed her power, nurtured her heart, and opened herself to the full experience of life. The promise that Wicasa had made was no longer just words. It was a living truth she carried within herself, a guiding light in every decision, every relationship, and every step of her journey. As she turned to walk down the hill, Wicasa joined her, his presence a comforting reminder of the journey they had shared. Together, they walked through the city streets, noticing the small joys of life, the laughter of children, the smell of fresh bread from a nearby bakery, the gentle rustle of leaves in the wind. Clara felt a profound sense of gratitude for the ordinary moments, knowing that life's beauty often resided in simplicity. By the end of that day, Clara felt a sense of completion. Her past heartbreak no longer held power over her. She had transformed sorrow into strength, grief into wisdom, and despair into hope. She understood that life was a journey of continuous growth, and that the courage to face challenges, embrace joy, and nurture herself would carry her through whatever lay ahead. And so Clara stepped fully into her new life, confident, resilient, and open-hearted. She had learned that the deepest pain could become the greatest teacher, that trust and love could be rebuilt, and that happiness was not a destination but a choice, cultivated every day through courage, kindness, and self-respect. She walked forward with a heart free from the weight of past sorrow, ready to create a life filled with joy, purpose, and the quiet, enduring strength that comes from truly knowing oneself. Clara's story, once marked by heartbreak, had become a story of resilience, hope, and transformation. She had reclaimed her life, not as a victim of circumstances, but as a creator of her own destiny. And in the quiet moments of reflection, as the sun set over the city, she smiled, knowing that she was finally free to live, love, and thrive, carrying the lessons of her past as a source of strength for the future.